Welcome to the Silent Epidemic by Omniotherapy. I'm your host, Mark Quirk, and today we're joined by Mark Quirk, a dynamic entrepreneur whose journey spans multiple industries from finance and healthcare to ultimate pool. Mark's career reflects relentless ambition, a deep understanding of strategy, and a drive to succeed. But with success comes pressure, and today we'll explore how he manages it all while maintaining mental resilience. So, Mark is my husband, so a bit personal guest, and welcome to the show, babe. Nice to have you on.
Yeah, nice to be on. I was wondering when I was going to get asked.
Yes. So, could you start by sharing how your career began and how you've balanced your mental health with your journey?
I don't know if I have balanced my mental health. I think that's a question in itself. I think in terms of business and starting a company, I'm quite fortunate, unfortunate, some would say, because in Peel in the Isle of Man, there wasn't any money. Everyone was skint, yeah. And I started working in the fish yards at 10 or 11 years of age, and so did all my friends. And in QE2 high school, out of, I don't know, maybe 120 boys, that's 3 years worth of boys in the high school, and multiple multi-millionaires have come out of there. And why is that? It's because of high levels of education and no cash from the family. It was recession Britain, and recession Isle of Man didn't look any better. It looked worse than recession Britain, believe me. And I remember my father had been laid off in that time. I remember us being in a bungalow. It was a 2-bedroom bungalow. My mum and dad used to sleep in the living room on a fold-down bed. Eventually, my dad built a garage and then converted it into a room. And that's just how it was. People didn't have anything, so that naturally gives you a gearing of wanting to do better and have more. It's usually what you miss. And we spoke about this morning, don't we? When you presented with something in your childhood, you either mimic that behaviour or you go completely against it. And my dad was an incredibly hard worker, and my mother worked hard as well. She's not with us anymore, and so that was what drove me to start working hard. Now, I didn't work hard immediately because I worked for a company called Hansard, and they asked me to leave because I never turned up. And I was more interested in playing snooker and pool and things like that. So, and then I went to Barclays, and again, I had this regime where I thought I worked 4 days a week. Actually, it was a 5-day week. And when I said I was leaving and they asked me to stay, I was looking behind me and I was thinking, are you talking to me? But then I came to a group, which is a tax planning group in the Isle of Man, and they were ferocious workers. We used to have a managing director, and he looked a bit like Bricktop from Snatch, and he had a really deep, gravelly accent. Fantastic professional, but in that period, he was a dragon. But that was the mentality. You're talking now 1997 onwards, and people were still smoking in the offices. There was no email. It was fax machines. That shows my age, doesn't it? Yeah.
I was going to say, you're not that old.
Yeah, I absolutely am, isn't it? And so everyone worked hard, and it was a big drinking culture. And we used to get in at 8, work till 9, down the boozer, go again, and that's what it was like. And that resilience of working incredibly hard and playing hard, it was installed in us. And I've got guys like Cliff Lewin and others that work with us now, and we've got that same work ethic, and not many have these days. That same day turnaround, that 24 hours, get it out the door. And and as much as I was being a bit maybe critical of the guy who was my old boss, and the guys underneath him, there was Alan, and there was John. I won't say the second names. I don't want to cut him, Steve, and etc. And Dennis was the top guy. They actually taught us amazingly well, and that was the foundation of being able to go into business myself, because I already had this unbelievable work ethic. So I started when I was 26, and it was tax planning. And I look at myself back then and how I was an animal. I remember being in an office just around the corner from where we are today, and it was in the middle of the day, and I'm swearing, F and see you next Tuesday. Sorry, viewers, okay? and I'm hammering my phone on the desk, and I'm screaming down the phone. Okay, and that wasn't that abnormal. That was the sort of thing that went on in offices 20 years ago. You know, it was absolutely carnage. And so we started the business, and bear in mind what I told you before, we just worked. So people would send a fax through. I would be taking it and answering it as the rest of the fax was coming in. I would print it off, and then I would fax back the answer as the fax had finished.
Mm.
And I would get a phone call asking if it was me, because they were worried that the authorities or someone might have been intervening or watching them, or someone might be doing a fraud, because they couldn't comprehend how quickly it was coming back. And that's how we built our businesses.
Mm.
You know, that's how it started. A relentless participation of excellence in giving the clients the best possible service and charging everything at a really low price. We had low overheads, and that's how we got the sort of entry. And the reason I say that and point it out is that I had no right to be starting a business. My mother was a cleaner and dad was an agricultural mechanic. So actually, to get myself to a place where I was able to get to the workplace, you know, it was a do or die type environment. And you know, and I've fortunately, maybe unfortunately for some, fortunately prevailed.
Looking back, what lessons from those early years have stayed with you throughout your journey?
When you're in business, you know, I've been 20 years at it now.
I think it might be more than that.
Are you sure? You're cheeky. So I've been at 20 years in business for myself. It's a difficult one to answer, because you don't have definite, finite teachings that you gain. And I'm learning all the time, by the way. I'm not immune, of course, and to making mistakes, as you readily explain to me on an episodic basis, but as any wife should do to her husband. I think the learnings I've had is use the carrot, not the stick. There is nothing to be gained by shouting and bawling. And and I've done a lot of shouting and bawling in my time, because remember what I told you at the beginning. That's how I was taught, and that's how I was at the beginning. Now, compassionate, incentivized, connection, calm. If people are working with you, if they're upset, they can't be creative and they can't do their best. They work in a state of fear, and and I think the other thing that we've got is and we've managed to do, through my own personal experiences, they're just there to feed their families or do the best for themselves and their future. As soon as you ingrain that in your belief system, you start respecting people, talking to them like they matter, being encouraging, genuinely interested. And that collection of people coming together and actually producing something which is for a collective benefit. Because the other thing I've learned is that you've got to share out really well what you're doing. Some people will say I share too much, and that's not just yourself, others as well. But my philosophy and my thought process is that we're only here for a finite amount of time, and we've done reasonably well out of what we've done, and we'll continue to do so, no doubt. And all being well. And we can only spend so much, you can only do so much. So if you don't share that out to incentivize the people with you, then actually you're failing yourself and also the business that you've started. And we're lucky, because all of the people that we've started out with, lots of them, most of them are with us still. And there's a reason for that. It's because of the connection, it's because of the love, it's because of the sharing, it's because of the idea that they need to succeed as well. And so the biggest learning I've had is how to keep a collective inspired, motivated, and together going forward. And it doesn't always go in a straight line. Sometimes people become demotivated and quite off the beaten path. But a leader's job, and someone who's an entrepreneur who started a business, is to inspire them and make them go again and see the bright side. And that perpetual optimism shouldn't be twined with being foolish. You have to be in a situation where you can examine yourself, have humility, and be able to convey that to the individuals that are around. So the biggest teaching, in summary, in one word, would be humility.
From what you mentioned there, it's like a complete shift, because you were talking about when you first started out, you've got a situation where your leaders as such were shouting and screaming and installing fear in their colleagues to perform and to deliver,
Mm.
basically, which it wasn't uncommon, you know, years ago to have that environment within the workplace. You sound like you've gone through the evolution of actually that doesn't work anymore, and I can't bring that into the workplace, and nor would you want to, because you want to see the best in people and you want them to enjoy coming into work and not coming to work fearful,
Mm.
because ultimately everyone's just trying to feed their families and bring money home, etc., etc. So changing your values from what you were taught to where you are today has been an evolution. But you've noticed in doing that, you've built a strong workforce. Most of the people that you started with are sort of still with you and are still valid members of the team and the businesses that you operate. And sharing is important for you, making sure that people are recognized for their contributions.
I think so. Going back as well, just to touch upon it, because I've mentioned some of the names, they weren't all draconian. There was mixed bags. Okay, I've got to say that as well. And also the ones that were draconian, they were recipients of draconian behaviour as well. Just so I'm not hanging them out to dry on a podcast. But I think you've hit the nail on the head in the sense that, and it reinforces the point I made before, carrot rather than a stick. And then that links into a fact. If you I'm better for my own mental health journey. I'm high functioning autistic, which is a standing joke because I tell it every day. I've got
Are you
yeah,
really?
that's right. Yes, and I've got ADHD, and so not being able to control and understand those neurodispositions in myself, that often fed into how things were at the beginning. Yeah, and I could be incredibly sensitive. I remember my old boss, Dennis, shouting at me one time and calling me an F and see you next Tuesday because I didn't put the phone through properly to him. And I've just been working a 13-hour day. I went in the toilets and I cried my eyes out. I was absolutely livid because I couldn't comprehend and process the emotion. And that's when we're talking about this being loving and kind to people, and that's what we described in the workplace and using the carrot. Um, that's won by hard. That's born out of hard-won experience. I haven't just been the perpetrator; I've also been the recipient. And so, when I got well and understood my neurodisposition, it made me more emphatic and empathetic, sorry, and sympathetic towards the plight of others in the workplace. And that's why we reach out on a quite frequent basis, and we're really understanding around virtually everyone's situation because we have it between us. I know it's meant to be about me today, but we have got it in our household, haven't we? Where we believe that you've got to be loving and kind, and that's the most prevalent quality towards our kids and everyone else, and that's in our workplace as well. If you're guys they might be the most talented guys in the world, but if they're not nice, we don't let them into our organisation because we don't want them around the people we've already got. We have to have that communication, and I think the foundation of any successful organisation are those qualities. Otherwise, people just up and leave; they're gone, and if you don't keep that that mentality and all of the intellectual property. And I say that it sounds very businesslike, but the intellectual property is the people, their experiences, their connection with not just the clients, the business, and the people who own the business. And that's where the quality comes through. And that's why we've been able to have quite a meteoric rise. Now, we've gone through a massive stage of investment and we've done lots of different things, as you well know, because that'll probably bring us on to Ultimate Pool later. And there's been others as well. We're now in a stage where the investment stops and we're at to milk the cow, so to speak. And that 20-year process is just, it was hard work, and you'll have your own comments around that, of course.
I think we'll move on from that bit.
Yeah.
But one thing that really struck out there from what you said was about your experience. So, you said you were highly sensitive and you've got a boss that's sort of shouting at you at the end of a very long day. And you said that at the time you didn't know that you were neurodiverse. So you didn't really understand your triggers and there's something really for employers or business people to really understand is each individual is unique. And sometimes a person hasn't really even understood what their own needs are, or have an underlying condition that hasn't been diagnosed, or they don't know. So having a one size fits all within your organization doesn't really work, does it?
Absolutely not. And what you just said there, I've got a belief that governments have got a massive problem on their hands due to COVID and all the other things
Mm.
that have happened. And those social issues are getting more magnified with electronic devices and things being instant. It accelerates the exposure of any individual towards all of the environmental factors. Now, with that, if you look at how many people are neurodiverse or have different mental health needs around the world who could do some sort of intervention, education, or experiences, you're probably talking 1 and 2. The experts will tell you lower. It's rubbish.
Mm.
Okay. And so industry has to lead the government out of this type of issue. And the best way that government can assist industry is to make it mandatory that every person working in an organization has to have psychiatric assessments, has to have therapy, has to have mentors, have to have work leadership projects that go on in relation to their mental health and their neurodisposition. Because if you did that, what would happen is you get a great deal of understanding and awareness, both self-awareness and awareness of others, and the mental health in the workplace would be so much better. And what would happen for industry, it would take an increase
Mm.
because you wouldn't have the presenteeism, the absenteeism, and all the isms. Okay, you'd have people working in the workplace who are actually finding places where they find home.
Mm.
And that would just increase everything. That would have a knock-on effect at home, with families, with everything. And so, when we're talking about neurodisposition, even today, I've come into the office here to do this with you, and I've been speaking to a few of the guys in the office, and they've said something that I haven't found comfortable, and I found it a little bit alarming that I've got to deal with. Even today, further on, I found it to the point I wanted to be sick, and I had to digest the feelings. No, I'm about to do this. And so the best way to describe it when you've got high functioning autism is, imagine that you've got a coffee filter and you put that paper in underneath and it sort of drips out through the beans. It can't go out quick enough.
Mm.
And the coffee up there's the discomfort, and until it drains away, it doesn't alleviate. And that's what it is. So when you're talking about employers, where they look at people and they might have an adverse reaction or might be highly sensitive, quite often it's not down to the fact that they've got a character misgiving or defect. That's how it presents, because they don't have the understanding of what the underlying would be.
Mm. And in a way, what you're saying is, if there was some sort of initiative in place where there was more of an, because we hear it all the time, don't we? Oh, mental health, and you're hearing a lot of labels, ADHD, this, that, the other. But there's still such a lack of understanding of, what do these things actually mean? What can workplaces actually do to support individuals that are experiencing these different conditions? It's almost as though if there was that initiative from government and people had that better understanding of themselves and how they worked and how they operated, workplaces would then be able to understand how best that individual works and almost make their position so it suits their strengths rather than their weaknesses. Because at the moment, you've got a situation where there's no understanding, and an employee is just plonked into a position and just expected to fulfill all parts of that role. When if they haven't got a full understanding of themselves or how they're operating, they're not going to understand that certain aspects of that role they're not going to be able to do as well as other aspects.
Everything that you've said, I completely agree with.
Mm.
I think the problems you've got is that things are still too driven by money.
Mm.
It's too instant gratification. There's not enough long game in relation to investment into this into staff members. Not all companies.
Mm.
If you, I've been with law firms and I've spoken to them about taking certain offerings from the healthcare group, and they've quite happily gone, oh, we take care of our people. I don't try not to use the word staff. I don't like it, sort of, but we take care of our colleagues. And I said, how do you do that? Well, we give them a sum of money to be able to go to the gym. And they sit there nodding to themselves. I said, and it crosses my mind, but what do you do about the working conditions of lawyers in London who are working 17 hours a day
Mm.
on an ongoing basis over the weekends? and often looking at substances to be able to stimulate, to forget because they're under such stress, or alternatively to enhance so they can get through the unnatural working conditions. Not interested. And it will be a journey, and it will take a lot of time for that evolution to take place. And what it needs is things like this and people to keep knocking on the door, and slowly but surely the people who are in prominent positions in companies and businesses who have their own experiences will start to have that empathetic outlook, who will then start to install. Because I've got a theory: you can't truly be kind and loving without suffering and having some of your own experiences. And those who can do it, well, they're just amazing. Because actually people, and it's natural, isn't it? We think of ourselves, firstly, our first thought is one of ourselves ordinarily, unless you've got a different disposition. And so it's about we're powerless over our first thought, but then taking reflection and what we do with it. And so when we're talking about the workplace, we can give a lot of education out. And I've got an expression, and it's not meant to be condescending, but when you're dealing with people who might not be as exposed and understanding of what we're talking about today, then you might have to talk on their level initially. And this is why, when you talk about mental health in the workplaces, it's often a wolf in sheep's clothing. You're having to get it in there. The wolf being the therapy is a bad analogy, isn't it? But you're having to get it in there under the pretense it's going to save you money. It's going to make you more productive. And it does, but there's not enough case studies to be able to say this is a concrete fact. And so unless something changes from government policy down to industry, you're never going to get there. You're going to be sort of knocking on a door. And you know what else as well? The lack of regulation around mental health in terms of the people who are giving out towards the service providers and what have you, a uniformed government standard, all-encompassing one authority giving out a complete and utter overview of how it looks. Because what you get from a lot of businesses is scrutiny and a look at them, and they label people that are counsellors and therapists not knowing any better, the woolly tie brigade. They're wet, they don't know any better, they're hippies and this type of thing. And that, unfortunately, is part of what the business world is today. Not all of them. There's been more of a shift in the last 10 years than ever before, but it's still an ongoing battle to be able to get people to come round.
I think the biggest issue comes from employment assisted programs. So a lot of companies are enrolled on these programs, and within them programs they offer therapy. But what those programs do is they offer 6 sessions of therapy, right? Which isn't to say that it's not helpful, but it will help for a particular point. So is the person struggling with sleep? Is the person struggling with their work-life balance? Is the person struggling with a specific issue in their life in that moment? But what happens is the APs, they don't really manage that correctly. So an employee goes along and goes to HR and says, "Oh, I think I need therapy." HR then refers them on to the EAP. They then have this 6 session of therapy. Employee thinks, "Right, I'm having therapy. I'm going to be all right." Well, in 6 sessions, you can work on that one particular thing. But you're never going to get to the root cause of various different things, or even get that full understanding of yourself. So it's almost, it works, but it doesn't work, because it can sometimes make it worse, because the person thinks they're having therapy, they're going to resolve their issues, when really they haven't even scratched the surface. So it actually puts them off the whole idea of therapy, because, "Oh, well, I had therapy and it didn't do anything."
When you said in relation to the 6 hours of therapy, and I think about my own experiences, I've had hundreds of hours of therapy. I grew up in therapy, in businesses, and you see this quite a lot actually. You get almost narcissistic, immature, eccentric behaviour. Quite often, people with business are shielded from, much like celebrities and football players and other people who manage to accumulate power and wealth in faster than ordinary circumstances. And then what happens is that they don't necessarily have the same social responsibility as others, and they're tiptoed around And so in my therapy, and we've had this conversation at home a lot, haven't we, over the years, and my therapeutic experience was I didn't even know what being selfish was.
Mm.
I didn't know. So it wasn't that I'm a bad guy. It was that I didn't actually know. And so that's down to the neurodisposition that it inhibits the evolution and the growing up process. And and I tell anyone that cares to listen, I fell into addiction, and that again stunted any development and what have you. And so yeah, in that therapeutic process, I grew up, and I can tell you now it weren't 6 sessions.
But this is exactly it. So these employers are thinking, well, we're providing the service, but it's almost a mismanagement. I get so frustrated by it because if a person doesn't know what to expect from those 6 sessions, it makes it worse. Number one, the employer thinks, well, we're doing our bit, we're providing therapy, but they're not even at the races. It's not even the start of it. And this idea or this notion that within 6 hours you can resolve what you need to work on, i- it's just frustrating.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But then again, it comes down to, again, lack of understanding, lack of education.
Mm.
Government's role needs to be making it mandatory to do certain things in certain ways, and actually investing in something into actually monitoring what goes on in the workplace, because that will have a knock-on effect socially and will save the money. But that's the conundrum of everything in government.
Mm.
If they spend over here, it will reduce it over there, but they don't have time.
Mm.
And so that's why industry has to lead it
Mm.
out. It's not the government's fault even. I know it's easy to bash the government and give them a massive hammering. The reality of the whole thing is they come in for a very short period of time, and there'll be good people, there'll be bad people, like anything else in life. And what will happen is, with best endeavour, they'll try to implement something. And then what will happen is you'll get a cross party or a new leader in the party. You'll have different ideals and everything gets undone. And so only certain things will come through. But industry is always there.
Mm.
And industry can have a social conscience, and industry can say, I'm going to care about my people in my organization. Now, I know you had Mark Chapman on not so long ago, and he was a big advocate for that in his time with Tesco's. He cared about the people.
Mm.
And so more people who are business leaders
Mm.
actually going against the grain of the norm, which might be a little bit bottom line centric, that will turn the tide. And hopefully, initiatives like this and other things that come around and becoming more and more prevalent, that will help to go on that journey. But like everything else, mass change only helps, so only comes to light over a number of years. It doesn't happen immediately, and it's moving the tide is no easy feat.
Your portfolio spans everything from private equity to healthcare to the metaverse and ultimate pool. How do you stay focused and manage the mental load of leading such diverse ventures?
Oh my goodness! I'm talking to our wife with everyone watching, so there's no place to go, is
You
there?
can't hide.
Do you know? I'm much better now than I ever was, and I think you can even agree that. I never used to have a concept of being angry and what the atmosphere was in the house, being upset, being down, being short, being miserable. And so I'm saying all of this because I want identification for people in similar
Mm.
circumstances. You have to be incredibly self aware. And man in the household, because physical disposition has a huge influence and can be quite a scary phenomena for a wife, for children. If they're in a bad mood, they're unapproachable, they're short. So it's about getting perspective. And I think perspective is that we've got kids, we've got a dog, we've got birds, which I don't really care about, to be honest.
Oh, it's not nice.
It's time for them to
Poor
go, I think.
birdies.
But I think in terms of getting better at it, it's about, we woke up this morning. It's about, are all our kids healthy?
Mm.
It's about, we might have nice and lovely things around us, but they're not the important things. Are all our family members okay? Is everyone healthy? Is everyone in a reasonable, good place? No one's happy all the time.
Mm.
No one's happy. No one's constantly happy, for that matter. In terms of, you could be content. No one's happy, 24/7 or anywhere near that. And so once you've got that, you work backwards, and then you start saying, well, what are the issues that might be upsetting me? And what's the core of them? And everything is an inside job. Everything. And ultimately, even if it's people that are upsetting you, then it's you that hasn't put the boundaries in place, and then you're able to change things. And so I think that's the initial thing of myself. I'm also told by my wife, being you, if I'm being that way, and in the early days that would be this complete and utter digestion or indigestion of feelings. How can she not understand? Does she not know what's going on? But that's self-obsession, and that self-obsession now is a lot less than it was in other years. I still have the capacity to go there, but now the recovery rate is far quicker. I can come out of it within an hour.
Yes, I can concur that
Yeah,
your
that's it.
recovery rates are, but it goes to show you that it can be worked on, and the process of change happens. Because in the early days, it would take days
Yeah,
sometimes for you to come out of it. And now you are much better at catching it.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think as well when you talk about love and these type of things, love is actually, we've come back before about not understanding your emotions, about people in the workplace and people, business leaders, being able to hide. Even prominent leaders in political and what have you, they can hide. Sports personalities, they can hide, because they've got adulation, people enabling behaviours and what have you. Real love to the people around you is getting that self-awareness and then also going on a journey. And actually, and you never stop. You always have to keep striving for personal development. I was on an app for Ultimate Pool the other day, and I was speaking about Nelson Mandela, and incredible. That's the sort of thing you need to be looking at to inspire yourself. It's about being loving and kind to all those around you. Because when you do that, you get to like yourself, and when you like yourself, you're able to prevail out of what goes on in relation to your mental health.
Running multiple businesses often comes with immense pressure. How do you ensure you're protecting your mental health while managing so much responsibility?
I think you do a good job of telling me, don't you? The long-haired CEO, I call you. I think it's about getting perspective and being really honest with yourself. Only just this last couple of weeks, I've honestly said, that's enough. The group's been growing. It's time to reap what you've built, and no more. And you know what? I think it's also a conversation I had with myself was, I've been at this 20 years. I've probably got another 20 in me. I don't have to do it all in my lifetime. There'll be children, there'll be family members, there'll be others that can be mentored to take on what they want to. And we've got massive families, and there'll be loads of people within it who'd like to. Because what was the motivation about doing these businesses in the first place? It was down to the fact that my mother was bloody homeless when she was younger, and she had no money. We had little money. Not due to a lack of effort, but my dad was from a farm. And so when we're talking about protecting our mental health, we've heard of justifiable anger. You can have justifiable self-harming in a cause that's greater than yourself. You become almost a martyr, and a lot of business guys can do that. They don't understand, and what they'll do is they get with their other business mates and how would they be, in a typical, old school, if you like, dynamic. And I don't want to get too ingrained in that because I'll get accused of being sexist, because I'm not in the slightest. But I think they'll hide out with other guys where it's just enough to work and not enough to be it doesn't need to be emotionally available. It has to be, you got to bring home the bacon, that type of scenario. When we're talking about handling the pressure of all the organisations, it's me that put the pressure on. I could have stopped ages ago and just put a line in the sand and started reaping it. And I'm at that point now, because I'm our kids mostly have grown up. Got one young one left and a dog, but we're in a situation that we can enjoy our lives. And so, but in order to get there, for me, I wanted to make sure that we were safeguarded against any of the phenomena that went on from my household. And not because anyone's bad, everyone's had their independent journeys, but in order to be able to create that prosperity and the chance and the ability, and where you can have all the things that you need, it was driven. So how do I protect myself from the mental health suffering from running all the different organizations. I think good people, lots of good people that will take loads off you. You've done an amazing job of being a support around those sort of things, especially in crisis times. And people won't see that. They won't see the fact that you give impeccable advice and really clear thought out and well constructed, arguments around things, and not just a pretty face and all the rest of it. And but that's where we get to, and some of the businesses are challenging. You talk about Ultimate Pool. Oh my God. You know what? At the moment, I think they think I'm the devil. Some of the prize money hasn't been paid quite on time, and the reason being is that I made the business start standing on its own 2 feet, and we've invested quite heavily into it. And when that comes around, um, you have to, again, that the challenge is there of not being liked, intimidating others, people thinking that actually you're born with a silver spoon in your mouth, not seeing all of the countless numbers of hours I've spent with individuals, mentoring, helping, assisting, supporting. That not fair element comes in, but part of being a leader is dealing with that. You've got to get perspective and all the different elements of all the different businesses. I've been given a gift, and that's my neurodisposition. I think like a computer. I can process anything really quickly and understand it and comprehend it and then action it. And for that, I'm grateful. But then again, I wouldn't have got to that without going through the hard work beforehand. And this was something I was thinking on when we were driving over here. Businesses can unlock the best versions of their employees by helping them go on a journey. And some of the talent will never come to rise because they'll be locked in their own head. The reason I did Ultimate Pool was because had I not done Ultimate Play Pool, I would have fell into addiction a lot quicker, and we wouldn't be sitting here now, and the businesses wouldn't have been built. That's the reason I did it. It wasn't to make money. It wasn't to, but in order to have it longevity, in order to have a structure for the sport not to be laughed at and for the people actually truly to enjoy, there has to be an infrastructure built. So at the moment, we've got a lot of people that are going around, they're doing tours here and what have you, and that's wonderful, and good luck to them. That's not our mandate, just to do tours. Our tours is to get a seat at the table with the rest of the Q Sports, get it on TV. We have done. Get it into technology, and we've built some wicked technology now as a consequence, and build a legacy that will last forever and change the mindset. So when you've got all the people watching you, they're not on that wavelength. And I think that's quite frustrating in businesses sometimes, the lack of ability for people to have the same vision as you. But again, that's acceptance. And and we're powerless over that. And I think also it comes down to that thing where you get upset with someone because they haven't shown the same principles and moral set that you have. And I think that's probably the most difficult thing to do in any walk of life, and that happens in business as well. People not having the same values, same vision, same abilities, same whatever it might be, and that in business life is really challenging. But then the word that comes is acceptance. Powerlessness.
Because that's it, isn't it? You're looking at, you've just explained, your drive behind Ultimate Pool and where it came from, and the fact that, if it wasn't for playing pool at a younger age, you're not sure what path your life would have taken had it not been for pool. You've got a view, you've got a vision, you've got an idea of why you've started it. People aren't in your head, so they're not necessarily seeing that vision and that view. So there's a bit of a disconnect between getting it to where it should be and having the support of that, because your view and your vision isn't as clear to the players because they're just playing a game that they enjoy and their hobby.
Absolutely. Yeah, completely. And the other thing is that, which is really interesting, with a lot of the players, I'm old enough to be their dad, and I forget sometimes how old I am, which is quite old. And that in itself needs to be tempered. And when I said before, I'm constantly working on myself, I have to take myself away and remind myself I'm quite formidable. I'll intimidate, as you quite often say to me, and bring my self-awareness when my self-awareness button's broken. And that must be quite scary for them. And what I came out with was a conclusion recently. And actually today, my old sponsors here, Paul Hannaford, and it's love all, harm none, and trust a few. And it bloody works. And it's the right way to be. The more loving you are, the more you get out of it. And I think sometimes we can forget that. We can get into a bit of a battle mode. And that battle mode doesn't really yield the best results. But the more loving you are, the better you tread. And I was once told by a very good therapist, um, do your recovery or your life like Federer, not Nadal.
Mm.
So it means gracefully go around what you're doing. Don't stomp around. And you're probably thinking, yeah, I've been telling you that for nearly a decade and a half now. And so that's really, across everything in your life. You,
Mm.
you can't get far away from that, to be honest.
So, Mark, it's been amazing to hear how you've balanced a high pressure career with the need to stay grounded. Before we go, what's one takeaway you'd like to leave with listeners about the importance of mental health in achieving success?
If you don't have good mental health, I said it before, you're 25% less creative. But it's not just that. You're unable to deliver the mandate of what a business might be asking from you.
Mm.
If you think about it, if you've just had a fight with your spouse, or you've shouted at one of your kids, or they haven't come home all night if they're an adult child or what have you, that feeling that's inside is one of unmanageability, despair, lack of fairness, whatever it might be. But it can disturb you. Well, if in the workplace you're disturbed constantly, how can you fulfill your role in what you're doing? Because you wouldn't be able to do it in your relationships.
Mm.
You'd have to gather yourself, take yourself away, and get yourself to a place where you need to be. So when you're talking about jobs that need to be done, it's about making it manageable. It's about, as a leader, you have to look at it and create an environment where people can work successfully
Mm.
and have a chance of succeeding. And so I think that the takeaway in one word is humility. You have to have humility. Look at yourself, look at the circumstances, put yourself in other people's shoes. If you're constantly evaluating that, then you're on the right path.
So, thank you for joining us on the Silent Epidemic. If Mark's story has resonated with you, please share this episode and join us for more conversations about resilience, growth, and well-being. Thank you for listening.